The night sky over the mountains was quiet, but something bright tore through the darkness. A burning trail of fire cut across the clouds before a loud explosion echoed through the valley. The ground shook, birds flew in panic, and dogs in nearby villages began barking wildly. People thought it was a meteor, but what had fallen was not from any known star chart. By morning, the rescue team from the nearby base arrived. They found a long smoking path carved into the forest. Trees burnt and metal scattered like broken stars. In the center of the wreckage lay a strange pod, half buried in the ground, glowing softly. It was smooth like silver, but pulsed with blue light as if it were alive. Captain Ross, the team leader, stepped forward carefully. His men pointed their flashlights at the pod, their faces tense. "Looks like a drone," one said. Ross shook his head. "No drone I know glows like it's breathing." They heard a faint sound from inside, not mechanical, not metal grinding. It was a cry, soft and weak, like a child's. Ross ordered the men to open it. They used their tools, cutting through the strange material, which melted instead of breaking. The hatch hissed open, and a wave of warm air hit them. Inside lay a small creature, tiny arms, fragile body, glowing veins under pale blue skin. Its eyes opened slowly, big and bright. Filled with fear and confusion, the whole team froze, not sure if they were looking at life or illusion. Then the child spoke, one broken word trembling from its lips. "Father." The forest went silent. Even the wind stopped for a moment. The soldiers looked at each other, unsure if they had heard right. Ross leaned closer. "What did you say?" The child reached out a small hand toward him and whispered again, "Father." Ross felt something in his chest he couldn't explain. Not fear, but something human, something protective. They wrapped the creature in a thermal blanket and carried it back to the base. Every time someone looked at it, it would stare back and whisper that same word, "Father." Doctors ran scans. Scientists took samples. But none could identify its species. It had two hearts, and its blood glowed faintly in the dark. Yet its face looked almost human. Too human. Dr. Lena, the chief biologist, watched the monitors as the child slept in the lab. "It's scared," she said softly. "Whatever it is, it's just a kid," Ross nodded, standing beside her. "Yeah, but a kid from where?" She showed him the readings. No radiation, no known virus. Nothing harmful, just different. Ross looked at the sleeping alien, its small hand clutching the edge of the blanket. He whispered, "You fell from the sky, little one," and called me father. Why? Later that night, the child woke up alone in the observation room. It looked around, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Through the glass, it saw its reflection and whispered, "Father." To itself, alarm suddenly beeped. Strange energy readings filled the screens. The light in the room flickered, and the child began crying. Glowing brighter with each sob, Ross and Lena rushed in, calming it down. The glow faded, and the energy readings returned to normal. Lena looked at Ross with wide eyes. "It responds to emotion. Its energy changes when it's scared." Ross stared at the child, still trembling in his arms. "Then we keep it safe." He didn't know why he said that, maybe because, deep down, it already felt true. Outside the lab, military officers whispered among themselves. Orders were coming from higher up. The object must be transferred to a secret facility. But as the child slept again, holding Ross's hand through the glass, he couldn't imagine giving it away. The night grew quiet again, and above the base, the stars shimmered brighter than usual. The little alien turned its head toward the sky in its sleep, murmuring softly in a voice that sounded almost human, "Father." "Where are you?" Ross watched through the window, not knowing that this strange child would soon change the fate of humanity forever. Days passed since the crash, but the memory of that night still haunted Captain Ross. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that soft voice calling him father. The alien child now stayed in a glass room at the secret base, surrounded by machines and curious eyes. It didn't cry anymore, but it often looked at the sky through the window, like it was waiting for someone to come. Dr. Lena spent most of her time with the child, studying and teaching it simple human words. At first, it only repeated what it heard, like a small echo of a human voice, but soon, it started learning fast, faster than any human child could. When Lena showed it a picture of the sun, it smiled faintly and said, "Warm." When she showed a picture of Ross, it whispered again, "Father," and touched the screen gently. Ross pretended to act tough, saying it was just a creature mimicking sound. But every time he passed the observation glass, the child's eyes followed him, its expression softened, and its glowing veins pulsed faster when it saw him. Somehow, it felt emotion, real emotion, and everyone in the lab could feel it too. One morning when Ross entered the lab, the child was sitting quietly on the floor. Drawing with colored markers, Lena smiled. "It started doing this yesterday," she said, handing Ross a paper. On it were strange glowing lines, shapes that looked like stars connected with symbols. Ross frowned. "Looks like a map." Lena nodded slowly. "Maybe memories," she whispered. The child looked up at Ross and smiled for the first time. That smile was small, shy, but full of life. It made everyone in the room stop for a moment. Then it pointed to the drawing and said softly, "Home." Ross froze. The word hit him harder than he expected. Lena looked at the child with wide eyes, realizing it wasn't just learning, it was remembering as days turned to weeks. The child learned faster than any scientist could record. It started speaking short sentences, asking questions, even laughing when Lena made jokes. But there was something else. Every time it laughed, faint lights appeared around it, tiny sparks floating in the air. The more emotion it showed, the more the air shimmered with glowing dust. Lena began to believe the child's energy came from its heart. Literally, a power connected to feeling. One night, a storm hit the mountains. Lightning flashed across the sky and thunder roared, shaking the base. In the middle of the night, the power went out. Plunging the lab into darkness, the backup generators failed. Alarms blared and the air turned cold. Through the emergency lights, Ross saw something glowing inside the observation room. The child stood there surrounded by a bright blue aura. Its small hands pressed against the glass, its eyes glowed like stars, and lines of light spread across its skin like living veins. Ross and Lena ran in, their footsteps echoing. The machines flickered back on as the glow from the child filled the entire room. Then in a calm voice it said, "Don't be scared, Father." The light slowly faded, and the child sat down, breathing heavily, as if it had just used all its strength. Ross looked at Lena, his voice low. "What just happened?" She whispered, "It powered the room. It replaced the generators." Ross stared at the child, speechless. "You mean it brought the base back online?" Lena nodded, her eyes shining with disbelief. "It's not just alive, Ross. It's connected to energy itself." The child looked up. Weak but smiling again, it pointed to the glass window. And there, drawn in glowing lines, was another symbol, a circle of light. Surrounded by smaller dots, like a star surrounded by its planets, Lena took a picture, her hand shaking. "It's sending a message," she whispered. Ross frowned. "To who?" The child didn't answer. It only looked up at the night sky through the window, the reflection of the stars dancing in its eyes. Later that night, Ross stood outside the lab. Looking at the mountains for the first time, he wondered if this child had truly fallen by accident, or if something or someone had sent it here on purpose. Inside the lab, the child lay awake, whispering softly to itself, "Home. Find Father." The wind outside carried a strange humming sound through the trees. Far away beyond Earth's atmosphere, a faint signal blinked in the darkness. Something, somewhere, had received the child's message. And in that moment, without knowing it, humanity's first contact had just become something much deeper. A bond that would soon change the fate of two worlds. For weeks, the strange glowing symbol the alien child drew on the glass haunted everyone in the base. Dr. Lena ran dozens of tests, scanning and decoding the pattern. But it was no human language still. She felt there was meaning behind it. Something deeper. Something that wanted to be heard. Every night when the base grew quiet, the child would sit near the window, tracing stars in the air with its glowing finger, and every time it would whisper one word in a soft, broken voice. Home. Captain Ross couldn't ignore the feeling that this child was trying to tell them something. He spent hours watching the recordings, every flicker, every gesture, trying to understand. Then one night, Lena called him into the lab, her voice shaking with excitement. "I think I found it," she said, pointing at the glowing map. "It's not just randoms, it's a star chart." Ross stared at the hologram, speechless. "You mean, this matches real stars?" Lena nodded, zooming in on a section. "It's a system that doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed nearly 100 years ago by a massive energy blast." The child watched them from behind the glass, its big eyes calm but sad. When Lena said the word destroyed, the glow around its body dimmed. Then it whispered softly, "Fire. Gone." Lena's heart tightened. "It remembers," she said quietly. It saw it happen. Over the next few days, the child started drawing more. Strange machines, bright circles, long waves like signals. Each drawing seemed connected like pages of a lost memory. Ross began to realize this child wasn't just a survivor, Incure. It was a messenger. Whatever had happened to its world wasn't natural, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't over. But as they studied, something new began to happen. Strange signals started to appear in Earth's orbit, bursts of unknown frequency. Repeating every few hours, the pattern matched the one the child drew on the wall. It wasn't random, someone was calling. Or searching. Lena frowned at the data. It's like someone out there is looking for this child. Ross's jaw tightened. Then we better hope they're friendly. One night, the child woke suddenly and ran to the window, pressing its small hands against the glass. Its glowing eyes looked terrified. Ross rushed in. "What's wrong?" The child pointed at the sky, whispering, "They come." At that same moment, the radar alarms went off. An unidentified object had entered the atmosphere. Not a meteor, not a ship, something else. The entire base shook as the signal grew louder, then vanished just as fast when the soldiers checked the sky. There was nothing, no craft, no trail, just silence. Lena checked the readings and froze. "Ross." The signal was the same as the child's heartbeat. Ross looked at her, stunned. "You're saying it's connected to that thing up there?" Before she could answer, the child collapsed, glowing violently. Its body trembled as light spilled from its veins. Ross rushed forward, holding it in his arms. "Stay with me." "Kid," the child's voice shook. "They found me." And then it fainted. Hours later, when the child finally woke up, its voice was faint. It looked at Ross and Lena and said, "Not safe. They kill." "Me?" Lena knelt beside it, her eyes wide. "Who? Who wants to hurt you?" The child looked scared, pointing upward again. "Hunters. They kill home. They find me." Ross stood up, his fist tight. "Then we're not letting them." But not everyone agreed. By the next morning, orders came from high command. The child was to be moved to a military containment facility. They said it was too dangerous to keep it in a civilian research base. Ross argued, "It's just a child, not a weapon." But his words were ignored. That night, as trucks prepared to move the child, Ross made a decision. He walked quietly into the lab, where the alien sat silently under dim lights. It looked up at him, its eyes filled with both fear and trust. Ross knelt and said softly, "I'm not letting them take you." The child tilted its head, whispering, "Father?" Ross smiled sadly. "Yeah, kid, I guess that's what I am now." He covered the child in a cloak, sneaking it past the guards under the cover of darkness. Outside, the mountains were silent except for the wind. As he carried the glowing child through the forest, a strange blue light blinked in the distance. Something in the sky was watching, waiting, searching. The child looked up and whispered weakly, "They come for me." "Father?" Ross looked back at the glowing eyes above the clouds and said, "Then they'll have to go through me first." And as the stars shimmered above them, somewhere deep in space, a fleet of alien ships turned their course toward Earth, following the call of the lost child who called every human, "Father." The night Ross escaped the military base, the forest was darker than ever. Cold wind brushed through the trees as he carried the glowing child close to his chest. Every step he took felt heavier, not from the child's weight, but from the fear that every shadow could be watching. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to keep moving. Behind them, alarms echoed through the mountain base. Soldiers rushed out with searchlights. Helicopters roared into the air. Ross's name flashed on every military screen. Captain Ross Harper, traitor. They didn't care about the truth anymore. Only the orders, bring back the alien. By morning, Ross reached an old abandoned space research facility hidden in the woods. It was once used to test rockets, but had been silent for years. He forced the rusted door open and stepped inside, laying the child on a dusty old table. The glowing veins on the child's arms were dimming, its breathing weak. "Stay with me, kid," Ross whispered, his voice shaking. The child opened its eyes slightly. "You protect Father," then closed them again. Ross found old blankets, wrapped the child, and turned on what few generators still worked. The lights flickered weakly, but it was enough. Hours passed before Dr. Lena's voice came through a small radio transmitter he had taken from the base. "Ross, what have you done?" she said, her voice full of worry. What I had to, he answered. They were going to lock it up like a weapon. Lena sighed softly. They think it's dangerous, Ross, but they don't understand. Maybe none of us do. Ross looked at the sleeping child. It's just a kid, Lena. It's scared, not dangerous. Days passed in hiding. The child began to recover, slowly gaining back its energy. Sometimes it sat quietly by the window, humming in a strange but soft tune that sounded almost human. Sometimes it laughed when Ross tried to make old military rations taste like food. For the first time, Ross realized the child wasn't just learning, it was becoming human. But something was changing. The glow in its skin was stronger now. The air around it sometimes pulsed with soft waves of energy. When Ross cut his hand while fixing the old power cables, the child gently touched the wound. The glow spread over his skin, and in seconds the wound disappeared. Ross stared in disbelief. You healed me. The child smiled faintly. No hurt, Father, Lena called again that night. Her tone different this time. Ross, listen to me carefully, she said. We found something, the child's DNA. It's part human. Ross froze. That can't be right. It is, Lena whispered. Its species and humans share ancient genetic markers, like cousins from long ago. Ross looked at the child sleeping peacefully. You mean we're connected? Lena hesitated. Maybe more than connected. Maybe humans were part of whatever they once were. Before Ross could answer, the ground began to shake, the lights flickered, and a deep, metallic sound echoed from the sky. He ran outside and froze. Above the forest, giant ships glowed in the clouds, their lights cutting through the fog. The sky was filled with shadows, alien vessels surrounding Earth's orbit. A deep voice echoed through every radio frequency, through every speaker on the planet. Return the air. Ross's heart stopped. Lena's voice came through the radio. Oh my God, Ross. They're here for the child. He looked down at the small alien standing beside him now, its eyes full of fear. It whispered, They find me. Ross clenched his fists. They're not taking you. Within hours, the world fell into panic. Governments locked down communication. Jets scrambled into the sky. The alien fleet did not attack, they waited. Surrounding Earth like silent gods, the message repeated again and again. Return the air. In the abandoned facility, Ross turned to the child. What do they mean, air? He asked. The child looked down, trembling. I'm last. Of my world. Tears welled in its bright eyes. They kill family. Now they come for me. Ross felt a chill run through him. The child he had saved, the one who called him father, was not just any survivor, it was something greater, something that could change everything. Lena's voice broke through the static again. Ross, whatever you do, don't let them take it. If they get the air, humanity will be next. Ross looked out the cracked window at the glowing sky. His reflection flickered beside the child's in the glass. 2 lives from 2 worlds standing side by side. And in that silence, as thunder rolled across the heavens, Ross whispered, Then we fight, outside. In the clouds above Earth, the alien fleet shifted formation. Their weapons began to glow, their engines humming like the sound of war approaching. The battle for the lost child had just begun. The sky above Earth burned with strange lights. Millions of people watched from rooftops, from cities, from deserts, staring at the alien ships floating like silent moons. They didn't fire, not yet, but their presence alone felt like judgment. Every world government was terrified, and every satellite screen repeated the same alien message. Return the air. In the hidden space facility deep in the forest, Captain Ross watched those words appear on the old monitor. He felt his stomach twist. The child, the small glowing being who called him father, stood beside him. Staring at the screen in silence, its face was calm, but its eyes shimmered with sorrow. Ross knelt beside it. What do they mean by air, kid? The child turned slowly, whispering, I am last of my home. Dr. Lena's voice crackled through the radio again, her tone urgent. Ross, listen, the more we decode, the clearer it gets. The child isn't just a survivor, it's a royal descendant. Maybe even a leader. Ross's heart pounded. Royal? You mean like a prince or something? Yes, Lena said. They're calling it an heir because its species ruled an entire empire once, an empire destroyed by war. Ross looked back at the child, who stood staring at the night sky, glowing softly in the dark. That means, Ross whispered, if they want it, They'll destroy anyone who stands in their way. The radio cut off as static filled the room. Outside, thunder rolled even though the night was clear. The ships in orbit began to move, slow and deliberate, positioning themselves around Earth like executioners preparing the blade. The child's glow flickered as it turned to Ross. "They come to finish what they start," it said softly. Its voice trembling, Ross clenched his fists. "Not while I'm breathing." He checked his old rifle, useless against ships that could melt cities. But it gave him courage. In the next hour, news spread everywhere. Alien signals jammed all communication. Electricity flickered across continents. People panicked, praying, screaming, or recording the sky with shaking hands. But in the forest, in that quiet, broken facility, a different battle was beginning. Ross and Lena had one mission: protect the child at all costs. Lena arrived at the hideout using an old emergency shuttle. Landing in the clearing behind the base, she ran inside, carrying data drives and half-broken lab gear. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Ross, it's worse than we thought," she said. "The aliens orbiting Earth, they're not rescuers. They're the same race that destroyed the child's world." Ross froze. "You're saying they're here to kill it?" Lena nodded. "To erase its bloodline forever." The child stood between them, small, silent, its hands shaking. "I can stop them," it whispered, "but need power, need stars." Ross crouched down. "You don't need to fight, kid, not again." The child looked up, tears forming in its glowing eyes. "They burn worlds, Father. They burn families. Mine. Yours next?" Ross didn't know what to say. Only that the word father broke something inside him every time it spoke. Outside, the air trembled with distant thunder, not from clouds, but from orbit. The first alien ship fired a warning blast into the ocean, sending waves the size of mountains. Governments screamed for answers, but Earth had none. For the first time in history, humanity was united. In fear, Lena turned to Ross, her voice breaking. "If the child really is what they say, maybe it's our only hope." Ross stared at her. "You mean use it as a weapon?" She shook her head. "No, not a weapon, a leader." He looked at the child again. Its glow brighter now, almost divine. It wasn't scared anymore, just sad, calm, and ready. The ground began to shake again, stronger this time. Ross grabbed the child's hand. "We'll find another way. We'll run." But the child pulled free gently. "No run, Father. I protect." The glow around it grew until the entire room filled with light. Machines hummed to life, screens flickered, and for a brief second, the symbol of the destroyed empire appeared on every monitor. A voice echoed from the speakers, not the child's, but something older, something recorded long ago. "Last of the royal line. Safeguard the seed of stars. For the new dawn," Lena gasped. "It's a message from its people." Ross turned to the child. "You knew?" The child nodded slowly. "They hide me here long ago, with humans. Because humans have same heart." Ross's voice broke. "You mean they trusted us to protect you?" The child touched his hand and smiled faintly. "Humans. Family outside." The alien fleet glowed red, preparing to strike. Earth's defense systems powered up, nuclear silos opened, and satellites turned their aim toward the heavens. Ross looked at Lena. "If this goes bad, tell them we never gave up." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "And if it goes right?" Ross looked down at the small glowing child beside him, its hand still gripping his. "Then the universe is about to remember who we are." The child looked up at the sky, its eyes burning bright. "Let them come," it whispered, its voice full of calm power. And as the first alien beam tore through the clouds, Earth's sky answered with light of its own. The war for the lost air had begun. The war began before dawn. The sky above Earth glowed red and blue as alien ships descended through the clouds like burning stars. Every nation on the planet watched in terror as the heavens opened. Cities trembled, oceans roared, and satellites burned like falling sparks. Humanity had never faced something like this. In the forest base, Ross stood with the alien child, staring at the horizon that now burned with light. The ground shook with distant explosions and the air was thick with static. Dr. Lena worked furiously on the old control panels, trying to connect to Earth's defense grid. "We need to help them," she said breathlessly. "The child's energy can boost our weapons, maybe even turn the tide." Ross looked at her, then at the small figure beside him. The child's eyes glowed brighter than ever. "I can try," it whispered, Ross knelt down. Kid, listen. If you do this, it might hurt you. The child looked up at him calmly. It hurt when my world died, Father. Not again. Ross felt something heavy in his chest, pride mixed with fear. He nodded slowly. Then we do it together. Lena connected cables to the child's glowing skin. The machines flickered and hummed as if waking from a long sleep. The entire base began to shake as energy surged through the floor. Blue light spread across the old monitors, connecting to satellites to defense towers. To every system still alive, the child stood in the center, arms open, glowing brighter than any star. Its small voice echoed through the speakers. For humans. For family. In orbit, the alien fleet prepared to strike again. But this time, Earth systems responded. Hundreds of satellites powered up, firing beams of light that tore through the clouds. Energy weapons that had never worked before suddenly roared to life. Human ships fought back with impossible accuracy. For the first time, the aliens hesitated. In the command centers across the world, generals shouted in disbelief, "Who activated the grid?" No one answered, but somewhere, in that old mountain base, the truth was glowing. The lost alien child was giving everything in its life, its power, its soul, to defend the world that took it in. Ross and Lena could barely stand as the room filled with light. The energy readings went beyond anything human technology had ever recorded. Lena's voice cracked. "It's too much, Ross. It can't survive this." Ross grabbed the child's hand, shouting over the noise, "Stop, you're going to burn yourself out." The child looked up, smiling faintly. "Humans fight for me. Now I fight for them outside." The alien ships began to fall one by one, their energy fields collapsing. The sky turned into a storm of fire and metal, but inside the base the light grew too bright to see. Machines melted, alarms screamed, and still, the child stood tall, glowing like a living star. Finally, the light burst outward, flooding the valley. The energy wave spread across the planet, shutting down alien weapons, breaking their communication links for a moment. The entire world was silent. No war, no fear, only light. When the glow faded, the base was quiet again. The walls were scorched. The equipment destroyed, Ross coughed. Looking around through the smoke, "Kid?" he whispered. Then he saw it, the small figure lying in the center of the room. Motionless, he rushed forward, lifting the child in his arms. Its body was cold, but still faintly glowing. Lena knelt beside them, tears streaming down her face. "It saved us, Ross. It saved the entire planet." Ross held the child close, his voice breaking. "Stay with me, kid, please." The child's eyes opened weakly, glowing faintly like dying embers. It smiled, whispering, "No more fear, Father. I'm home." Ross shook his head. "You belong here with us." The child reached up, touching his face gently. "Humans, my family." Its glow flickered one last time before fading completely. The room fell silent. Outside, the sky cleared, and for the first time in days, sunlight touched the earth again. The alien fleet, crippled and broken, began retreating into the black void. They had lost, humanity had won, but at a terrible cost. Ross sat in the ruins of the base, holding the lifeless body of the being that had saved an entire world. Lena stood beside him, her voice trembling. "We have to tell them, Ross. Tell everyone what it did." He nodded slowly, eyes still on the child. "We will." As the wind blew through the broken windows, a faint spark of light lifted from the child's chest, a small, glowing crystal that pulsed like a heartbeat. Lena gasped softly. "It's still alive. In some way." Ross closed his eyes, whispering, "Then maybe someday we'll see it again." High above the clouds, the stars seemed brighter. The same stars the child once pointed to when it whispered, "Home." Now they shone like candles in memory of the one who chose humanity over the universe. The lost alien child, the one who called every human father, had become the reason Earth still stood beneath the stars. The war was over. The skies that once burned with alien fire now glowed with soft sunlight. Across the world, people stepped out of shelters and saw blue skies again. There were no more ships, no more thunder, only silence and the quiet hum of survival. In the ruins of the old space facility, Captain Ross stood beside Dr. Lena. Before them, inside a glass capsule, lay the small glowing crystal they had taken from the child's chest. It pulsed gently like a slow heartbeat. Every pulse lit the room with a warm, golden light. Ross stared at it for a long time, whispering, "It's still here. Still watching." Lena nodded softly. It saved us, Ross. It saved everyone. News spread across Earth about the mysterious light that had destroyed the alien fleet. No one knew the full truth, but stories began to form. Stories about a child from the stars who protected humankind. Some called it a myth, some called it a miracle, but those who had seen it with their own eyes knew it was real. Years passed. The world rebuilt itself, stronger, wiser, united under one sky. The nations that once fought each other began working together. Humans had seen the stars, had faced extinction, and had survived, not because of weapons, but because of something pure, a child's love. Dr. Lena became the head of the new Space Alliance. Her first project, the Lost Child Initiative, a mission to reach beyond the solar system, to find where the child had come from, to honor its memory by exploring the stars it once called home. Captain Ross, now older, visited the child's crystal every year. He would sit alone in the quiet chamber and talk to it. He told it about how humanity had changed, how people no longer feared the unknown. He told it about children learning to look up at the night sky, not with fear but with wonder, and sometimes when he spoke, the crystal would flicker softly, as if it were listening one evening. As Ross stood by the window overlooking the launch site, Lena walked in, holding a small device. "They finished building it," she said with a faint smile. "The first interstellar ship." Ross looked at her. "What did they name it?" She smiled sadly. "The Lost Child." Outside, the massive starship gleamed under the setting sun. Its hull shimmered with a faint blue light, the same color as the glow that once surrounded the alien child. Engraved on its side were simple words, "To the stars, for the one who showed us who we are." The day of the launch arrived. Crowds gathered around the world, watching on screens as the engines roared to life. Children waved small flags with the image of a glowing star child drawn in light. The ship slowly rose from the ground, breaking through the clouds, and as it reached the edge of the atmosphere, the sky seemed to shimmer brighter. For a brief second, a faint, childlike voice echoed through the static of the broadcast. "Father, look." Ross froze, staring at the screen, his heart pounding. Lena turned to him, tears in her eyes. "Did you hear that?" Ross smiled faintly, whispering, "Yeah, I did." As the ship vanished into the blackness of space, the stars above Earth shifted slightly, forming a familiar pattern, the same one the child had once drawn on the lab glass. A ring of stars surrounding one bright light in the center. People across the world looked up and saw it. Some gasped, some prayed, some simply smiled. Because deep down, everyone felt the same truth. The child was still out there. Years later, humanity spread beyond the solar system. They built colonies, explored worlds, and left markers wherever they went, on every planet they touched. They built a monument, a glowing crystal like the one Ross kept, and at the base of every monument, engraved in countless languages, were the same words. The universe once sent us a child who called every human father, and in return, humanity became a family of stars. Captain Ross passed away peacefully years later, sitting by the crystal that still pulsed softly in the dark. When they found him, he was smiling, his hand resting gently against the glass, and for a moment the crystal glowed brighter than ever, filling the room with a golden light. Some swore they heard a faint whisper in the air, a voice small, gentle, and full of love, saying, "Thank you, Father, above Earth." The night sky shimmered again, and somewhere in the endless sea of stars, a faint blue light traveled between galaxies, never fading, never alone, because even across the universe, the bond between a lost child and humanity lived on forever.